ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste, my dear friends. In this video I am going to start Vivek Chudamani with verse number 151. One cannot quench one's thirst by eating the moss. Drinking water alone can quench thirst. Identification with the seeds will never give anyone lasting happiness. Realization of one's true nature alone will give eternal bliss. The moss is not water, though it is born out of water. The five seeds, Panchakosa, are not the self, though they are born out of the Atman. Stanza 151. Pancha nam api kosa nam apvade vibhatayam shuddham nitya anand karsah Parte grupah par swam jyoti. When all five seeds have been negated, the self is apprehended as being the essence of everlasting bliss, as the indwelling self-effulgent spirit supreme. The five kosas have apparently arisen from the Atman. They have their individual properties and accordingly their definite sets of experiences. However, their tragedies and comedies do not belong to the Atman, the consciousness. When I, the conscious entity, withdraw from them all, the subject illumines itself, since consciousness is self-effulgent. This consciousness is eternal, nitya. Eternal is that which is not conditioned by the past, present, and future. Reality is eternal bliss, nityananda, a bliss that is not conditioned by time. Time is a concept of the mind, and hence this bliss is an experience transcending the mind. Also, it is of one essence, eka rasaha, changeless, uncontaminated, and eternal. This Atma is realized subjectively, deep within the heart, and not objectively as something existing somewhere outside. When the dreamer becomes the waker, the dreamer ends. Similarly, when I come to apprehend the Paramatman, I realize how baseless and stupid it was that I had considered myself to be this little Jivatman. Stanza 152. Atma anattam vivekah kartavyo bandha muktaye vidosha tannaiva anandi bhavanti swam vigyayasatchidanandam. The wise man should discriminate between the self and the not self in order to remove the bondage. Only then does he know his own self to be absolute existence, knowledge, bliss. Only then does he become happy. Those who walk this path of jnana have always to distinguish between the Atman and Anatman. An intelligent person who is learned in the scriptures should, in order to liberate himself from bondage, constantly discriminate between the real and the unreal, the self and the not self. One part of his personality should continuously analyze every experience to find out which part of his personality layer it springs from. Having ascertained clearly that such and such an experience belongs to the body or the mind or the intellect, he should direct his attention upon the self and feel that the experience belongs to the equipment, not to the self, which is his real nature. By this process of discrimination and assertion alone can he realize himself from the sorrows of bondage and keep his rendezvous with this self and dock himself in everlasting happiness. Thereafter there is no strife, no stress and no strain for him. By realizing that the self existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute is his real nature, he transcends his body, mind, intellect, equipment. Stanza number 153. मुज्जादेशी कामवी दृश्य वर्गा प्रत्यक्ष पंचात्मानं संगम क्रियम विविच्य तत्र परिविलाप्य सर्वं तदात्मना तिष्ठति यः मुक्तः. He who separates all sense objects, perceived, felt and thought of from the subjective, unattached, actionless self, like the enveloping sheath separated from the core of the munja grass, he is free, for having merged everything with it, he remains ever identified with it. Munja is a type of grass which is nothing more than a stalk of leaves held together like the common plantain tree. These sheaths can be removed from one by one until the central core is reached. Similarly, the Atman, which is actionless and unattached, can be taken out of the enveloping sheaths. But one must be very careful because the inner core is very tender and delicate. All that can be classified as seen, which is perceived, felt, and thought of, is other than the subject covering the Atman, which is like the core in the munja grass. The BMI and OET are the objects perceived which veil the self, just as the soft tender core of the munja grass can be reached and revealed by removing sheath after sheath. So too all the coverings of the self can be removed and the Atman, which is unattached and actionless, can be reached. This Atman, which is always inside, revealing as the subject in every bosom, Pratyak, is not available for our cognition now because we remain ever looking through the coverings of the BMI. When this consciousness, the actionless, the state of objectless awareness is realized, the entire perceptible phenomenal world merges into it. Just as on waking up, the dreamer and his dream world merge into the waker. He who thus reaches the self and merges with it is a liberated one. He has no more coming and going into this world of perceptions, feelings, and thoughts as a doer enjoyer ego. This verse provides us with the definition of a liberated man, a man of God realization. In the following verses, the Acharya addresses the seekers directly. The five seats Panchakosa are taken up one by one and each one is described fully. The universal teacher Sankara shows how they can be transcended one by one, and how can one ultimately reach the experience of the subjective self. Negation of the five kosas. Annamaya kosa food sith. Stanza number 154 to 164. Stanza number 154. Deho देहो ये अन्नम भवनो अन्नम यस्तु कोशः यश्चान्येन जीवति विनश्यति तद्विहीन तव चरम मांस रुधिर शिथिर पुरिसरासि स्वयं भवित महति नित्य शुद्ध. The body is a product of food. It constitutes the food sheath. It exists because of food and dies without it. It is a bundle of skin, flesh, blood, bones, and filth. Never can it be the self-existing, the eternally pure Atma. From this verse onwards, there is deep reflection on each of the five seats of the human personality. One by one, they are taken up, exhaustively investigated, reflected upon, and as a result of this deep and unbiased reflection, each one is in turn negated. These 10 verses discuss the physical body, the food sheath. The physical body is the most powerful attraction for the majority of living beings, and most of us are aware of nothing nobler and diviner than the body. For millions and millions of years, man has been living in this world mainly as a physical entity. Life after life, he has been living and striving under the self-preserving instinct, and to say all of a sudden, I am not the physical body is ridiculous, impossible, and supremely absurd. Proper light has been thrown upon the assertions in these verses by the well-known technique of scientific observation and analysis. The constituent parts of the body, their behavior, how the body gathers its knowledge of the world outside, its relationship with the possessor of the body and with the world around. When all these are analyzed and carefully investigated into, we shall readily come to know that we are in fact not the body. With this subjective knowledge alone, is it possible for us to learn to withdraw from the body identifications? The arguments are convincingly marshaled here. To remember these arguments is to help ourselves in our daily independent reflections. In this verse, the body is brought under the focus of our close observation. This body was born out of the seed in the loins of its father. The seed is formed by the food assimilated by the father. When the seed was in the mother's womb, it was being maintained by the food taken by the mother. After birth, it grew because of the food taken and assimilated by it day after day. When it perishes, it shall become food for other living creatures like birds, insects, and plants. Hence, that which is born out of food exists in food and goes back to be food for others is appropriately called the food sheath, Annamaya Kosha. This body, when carefully analyzed, is bound to be constituted of skin, flesh, blood, bones, and marrow. The container made up of the above parts is filled with fecal matter. All these together constitute this fascinating, this enchanting my body. Therefore, this filled, unholy body cannot be the ever pure and resplendent Atma because the parts that constitute it are finite. Stanza number 155. पूर्वं जनेर्धीमृतेरपि नयमस्ति जातक्षण अक्षण गुणो नियत स्वभावः नैको जडस्य घटवत्स परिदृश्यमानः स्वात्मा कथं भवति भाव विकारविता. Before its birth it does not exist, nor does it continue to be after its death. It lasts only for a short period. Its qualities are fleeting and by nature subject to change. It is diversified and inert and like a jar is a sense object. How then can it be the self, the witness of all changes in all things? This body came into existence with the birth of the individual. After death it shall perish and decay. Its existence is only for a short time from its birth to its death, at the most a span of 80 to 100 years. From the concept of infinite time, 80 or 100 years are most insignificant. Indeed, this body is very short-lived. Psychologists have discovered that no dream can last for more than 1.5 minutes. Within this short time span, we dream sometimes the experience of many years. From the concept of the waking time, the dream time is very short. From the vision of infinite time, our lifespan too is very small. The concept of time itself is relative. During this short period of time, while the being resides in the body, the nature of the body changes from moment to moment. Now it is happy, now unhappy, now sattvic, now rajasic. A good man becomes bad and a bad man good. All the time the gunas are changing. The changes physical, emotional, and intellectual cannot be stopped. Their expressions continuously manifest through the body. As long as the body is carefully looked after, it lives. If we neglect it, even then it lives. Now it is up to each one to decide whether looking after it is necessary or not. It lives because of its destiny, prarabdha. The nature of this body is most uncertain and unsteady. It can never be predicted with exactitude. Also, there is not such just one body. Each one has his own body, different from all others. How then can this be the Atman which is one without a second? The body by itself is inert. It is not conscious. My clothes move where I move, but they have no independent movement. When the individuality presiding over the body's activities departs, it perishes. Like a pot or a jar, it is an object of perception. It has no knowledge or consciousness of its own. It is not the perceiver, but as an object of perception, it is the perceived. It merely helps consciousness to be conscious of the world of objects through it. It is only an instrument for consciousness to function through. Just as a telescope by itself cannot see distant objects, but an intelligent observer alone can see them through the telescope. Similarly, consciousness functions through the body. How then can this inert body be the consciousness which is the knower of all thoughts and thought modifications? In this verse, we have arguments to indicate that the body cannot be the self, for indeed it is nothing but a cancerous growth on the Paramatman. Stanza number 156. पाणिपादादि मानदहनो अनात्मा व्यंगेऽपि जीवनात् तत्तच्च रक्तेन नासाश्च न नियम्यो niyamakaha. The body which is made of arms, legs, etc. cannot be the Atma, for even if these organs are amputated or removed, it continues to function efficiently. It is thus subject to the rule of another and cannot be the Atman, the ruler of all. This body is constituted of limbs such as the hands and the feet. Even if the limbs are amputated, the body continues to live. The life is not hands and legs. The functions of the limbs are specific. Normally, one limb cannot perform the function of another. Eating food with the legs or moving about on the hands is not possible. But the self is omnipotent. This body is regulated and controlled by the subtler personalities of the man. That which is controlled by others cannot be the Atman, the controller of everything. Here then are more arguments to reflect upon to realize that I cannot be this body. Stanza number 157. Dehe tad mat karam tad avasthadi sakshune sat ev sabtah siddham tadval lakshane atmane. It is self-evident that the Atma is the enduring reality, that it is different from the body and its characteristics, its states and activities, that it is a witness of them all. The Atman is the witness of the body, its nature, its activities, its states, etc. That which is the witness of thing cannot itself be thing observed. The seer is always something other than the seer. Therefore, it becomes clear that the Atma is something other than the body and that the body is not the self. This is yet another argument to prove it. Salaram Sila Lipsto Malmutro. Verse number 158. Salera Shimarlipto Mal Murno Tiskasmale Katham Bhavedayam Vita Saumevati Divilakshana. How can the self-existent Atman, the knower, ever be the body which is a packet of bones covered with flesh full of filth and extremely impure, for it is always distinct from it. This framework of bones, plastered with flesh and filled with fecal matter, is at all times most impure and inauspicious. The container and the contained are both filthy. How can this be the ever pure, all knowing principle, the Atman? Here is one more argument clearly showing that the Filthy body cannot be the pure and divinely holy self. Stanza number 159. Tavam mas medo sitar purisharasha vahmati mood janah karoti vilakshanam veti vicharshilo niz saurupam parmarth bhutam. The foolish man identifies himself with this skin, flesh, fat, bones, and filth. But the man of discrimination knows that his self is distinct from the body, unique, and the only reality. Fools consider themselves to be this packet of filth consisting of skin, flesh, fat, and bones. These are in themselves nothing but filth, each one of them. Those who have the habit of correct analysis and right thinking consider themselves certainly something other than this filled body filled with its contents which are equally filthy. Correct analysis and right thinking will point to us man's real nature, which is supreme truth, pure consciousness itself. It is not the body as its nature is distinctly different. Vilakshana from the body and its component parts. Stanza number 160. Deho mittev jadasya buddhi dehe cha jive vidustvam bhandi विवेक विज्ञानवतो महात्मनो ब्रह्मा ही मित्येव मति सदात्मनि. I am the body, thus thinks a foolish man. A man of mere book knowledge considers himself to be a combination of the body and the jiva, but the realized says because of his discrimination knows that I am Brahma and looks upon the eternal Atma as his self. Fools who have no discriminative power consider themselves to be the body. They think I am the body. Erudite scholars who read many books conclude that in addition to the body they have a psychological and intellectual entity in them. But those great souls who have the discriminative power between the self and the not self, they in their direct experience of truth realize themselves to be Brahma. Just as a spoon is needed only for eating and need not afterwards be carried about everywhere, similarly, the wise know that the body is necessary only to spoon out their experiences and subsequently serves no purpose whatsoever. This verse explains the three schools of philosophy prevailing in India. The three great masters Madhva, Ramanuja and Sankara studied the same Upanishads, experienced and explained the same truth, but while expounding it, they propounded three different schools of philosophy. They are dualism, Dvaita, qualified non-dualism, Visishta Advaita, and non-dualism Advaita. These three schools do not differ from each other except in explaining the relationship of man with God. In everything else they are the same. They all consider that the life of the flesh is not the goal of life. All of them assert that there is a great reality to be experienced and consider that the life of the flesh is full of sansaric sorrows. They hold that the experience of that reality is the acme of evolution, the state of complete fulfillment. They all accept and base their arguments upon the declarations of the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, the difference in their explanations should be considered as having been due to the difference in the types of students they addressed during their respective times. Some students, in their total identification with the body, consider themselves to be the body. Such students can have but one relationship with the Supreme, that they are entirely different from it. Accordingly, they have been told that they are entirely different from God. Such students are addressed by Acharya Madhava, and his school of thought is known as Dvaita or dualism. The second type of students, slightly more intellectual, insist I am a composite being comprising an anatomical structure with physiological functions and also a psychological entity with intellectual abilities. I am the body as well as the jiva, the individuality, the thinking, feeling entity. The psychological and intellectual entity has the glow of reflected divinity. Just as in the achievements of an artist or a scientist, there is certainly a spark of divinity. Such students are addressed by Sri Ramanujacharya. He says, "You are not separate from truth. You are a part and he is the whole." This school of thought is Visishta Advaita or qualified non-dualism. The third variety of students, however, are the intellectual giants who, through sadhana, develop a subtle intellect and discriminate between the real and the unreal. They have the capacity to live up to their convictions by fully accepting what is real, ever rejecting what is unreal. As a result of their dispassionate discrimination, they consider themselves to be entirely different from their matter vestures and realize their identity with the Supreme, the Brahma. Such students are addressed by Sri Sankara, for he says, "Thou art nothing but Brahma." This school of philosophy is known as Advaita or non-dualism. All 3 points of view are explained in this verse now under discussion. Stanza number 161. अत्रातम बुद्धि तज्जे मूढ़ बुद्धे वंगमास मेदो शिखर पुरीश्रासौ सर्वात्मनि ब्रह्मणि निर्विकल्पे कुरुस्व शांतिम परमा भजस्व. Cease to identify yourself with this packet of skin, flesh, fat, bones, and filth, O foolish one. Instead, identify yourself with the absolute Brahma, the self of all, and gain the experience of supreme peace. In this verse, Acharya Sankara is advising the students to give up their false and painful identifications with the Anatman. What is to be renounced is only the idea I am the body. Renounce not the house, nor the wife, nor the children, money, position, status in society, etc. need not be given up, but only the idea I am the body is to be totally renounced. Those who consider themselves to be the body, whose constituents are the skin, flesh, fat, bones, and filth, are addressed as fools by the Acharya. Giving up the identification with this packet of filth, Atma Buddhi, the sense of I-ness, should be redirected into the right channel towards the unchanging eternal self everywhere, the Brahma. Thus fixing the identification in Brahma, which is the Atman, the self, come to experience and enjoy supreme peace. There is no peace as long as we identify with the body, which is the cause for all our sorrows. Stanza number 162. Deh indriya yada vasti bharmodita vidvan hantam nenjahati yavat tavan tasyasti vimuktivarta yastvesi vedante antardarshi. There is no liberation for a man of mere book knowledge, even if he be very well read in the philosophy of Vedanta, so long as he does not give up his false identification with the body, sense organs, etc., which are unreal. Avidya or spiritual ignorance is the cause for one's delusory identification with the matter, vestures, and the effect of this identification is bondage. Unless the cause is removed, the effect cannot be removed. To see a thing as something other than what it actually is called delusion, bharma. From the standpoint of Brahma, the body and the sense organs do not exist at all. It is possible to gather from the study of Vedanta that there is an Atma, which is the absolute and ultimate reality, which is something other than the body, the sense organs, etc. But it is not possible to have the experience of truth unless one completely subjectively ends the identification with the body. Here, neither can there be any help from the sacred scriptures nor from the teacher. At this point, it is to be carefully noted that what is to be given up is the identification with the body and not the body itself. As long as this identification remains, there will not be no experience of the Supreme, but there cannot even be a talk of liberation. One will be nowhere near the self if this body identification persists. Stanza number 163. छाया शरीरे प्रतिबिंबम गात्रे यत् सोपन देहे हृदय कल्पितंगे यथा आत्म बुद्धिस्त्वः नास्ति काचि जज्वच्च शरीरे च तथैव मास्तु. Just as you would not identify yourself with your shadow, your reflection, your dream body, or the body in your heart's imagination, so too you should not identify yourself with your living body. Giving up identification with your body does not mean neglecting it. If it is neglected and not kept clean and healthy, it becomes a problem for you and for the people around you. You will ask then, in what way should I keep my body without identifying with it? What should be my relationship with it? What is your relationship with your shadow? How much do you identify with your reflected image? How do you keep up your dream body and look after it? Such should be your relationship with your living body too. In the shadow body, the reflected body, the dream body, and the imagined body, you do not have the idea I am this. While working in the world with this body, let there always be an idea in your mind that this body is only an instrument of mine with which I contact the world outside in order to serve it as much as I can. But I am always something other than the body. The body should be kept and looked after only as an instrument, a vehicle. Always keep it as best as it can be kept. Take out of it as much work as is possible so that vasanas may get exhausted, for if it falls away in death prematurely without exhausting the vasanas, another body will have to be taken, but do not get attached to it. Free as you are, be free and use the instrument efficiently, continuously. In the last line, with the peculiar usage of the negative ma, ought not to, instead of the usual negative na, don't, Sankara implies more of a humble request than a categorical warning. He means it would be good for the sadhak if he were to maintain this mental attitude towards his physical body. This is a classical usage of negation often used in our shastras. It has not the force of the imperative, it is a suggestion. Stanza number 164. De atam dhirev nirnam siddhya janmadi dukh prabhavasya bijam yat sat satvam jahitam priyatnam tyakte tu chittene punarbhavasya. For those who are attached to the unreal, identification with the body is the seed from which the misery of birth, etc., stems forth. Therefore, put in all your efforts to destroy it. There can be no chance of rebirth if this identification caused by the mind is renounced. This verse concludes the reflection upon the body. The body, like all other objects in the world outside, must undergo the fivefold change: birth, growth, disease, decay, and death. Every change has inherent pain and consequent sorrows in it. When identified with the body, one has to undergo all the sorrows which arise from it and its unavoidable modifications. Therefore, the cause for these sorrows is the identification with the body. The idea that I am the body is the seed from which all these sorrows stem forth. So the only way to get rid of these sorrows is to renounce this devastating identification. Each one of us has been living with this identification for ages, all through our many past lives. Any amount of study and logical arguments will not help us to stop this identification. At times, no doubt, we may feel that we are not the body, but the very next moment, alas, we fall back into this natural delusion. Acharya Sankara advises us to give up this identification through effort, practice, and exercise of all the will. Prayatnat. Prayatnat. Time and again, we are required to study and reflect, to feel and think, to contemplate and meditate that we are not the body and that we are the supreme reality. When this study and contemplation has taken deep roots in our understanding, chitta, and when glimpses of reality are perceived, then there is no more any becoming. Becoming means getting subject to change. These fivefold changes will not affect the individual who has disengaged himself from the sense of being the body and has identified himself with the nature of the Supreme Self. When the idea I am the body is removed from the intellect, when the subtler equipment is disengaged from the body, then there are no more any vasanas in the inner equipment. The body will go on like a car for as long as its momentum lasts. Therefore, since it has no more vasanas for taking up another body, the individual crosses all becoming. The analysis of the body, Annamaya Kosha, is over with this verse. Next is the Pranayama Kosha, the vital air sheath, also known as the physiological layer of man's personality. So I conclude this video at this stage. Next video will start with stanza number 165 and topic will be Pranayama Kosha, vital air sheath. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar, Namaste.